for the sake of clarity, those of you who are coming in from off campus, I'm explaining to you where we are and what you're logged into and who's joining us today. So I'm Professor Rose Desiano, and this is Kutztown University in the art department, and we are closing out our season of the Equity and Awareness in the Arts lecture series. I'm excited to have Lorenzo and Sarah with us as our final presentation for a variety of reasons. Amongst them, you are our first collaborative to speak. And so I think it's interesting to see practices grow and develop and to see how people from different backgrounds come together and create work together. And it seems like a very nice way to tie up an entire lecture series. You're in my photography studio class with my students, who you will see at the end if you want to ask questions. They are watching you on a big screen. And for those of you who are joining us off campus, again, this is a lecture series sponsored by the Dean's Office to bring artists to the community, both in the classrooms and also off campus. So that's what we're a part of. I am going to make my bio presentation fairly informal because I think you intend to speak about your work together and how you came to be together. And so I don't want to undermine the detail and the specificity that you will share. I do want to, however, talk a little bit about how our presentation came to be today, because I think it is a part of what we've been talking about all semester, which is community and how people make work and grow. And so I would say I don't know Lorenzo and Sarah very well, but I do know them as neighbors, literally. Their studio is next door to mine in Brooklyn, and we got to know each other because one day, to share all the personal information, I was putting the toddler part of my child's bed into storage, also in my studio, and they had just finished an incredible exhibition that they were unpacking and reorganizing back into their studio. And through a conversation about, will you be talking about your experience at, yeah, okay. So basically through a combination of the nuts and bolts of being an artist, oh my God, I don't have enough storage unit to do this. We got into a chat and we are now shelving twins. So we just shared shelving and talked about that and what it's like to just have a practice that produces objects and how these objects are valuable and they carry from project to project. And I just wanted to share that story because it is really how creative communities grow. Sometimes it's not an incredibly intellectual conversation. Sometimes it's literally like, I need a shelf for a box, and that happens. So from there, though, I learned through putting this lecture series together, I obviously explored their work further, was really excited about it, thought it'd be great to bring it to the university. And when I put the posters up, one of our colleagues, my colleagues, and your professor, Professor Samantha Nye, who just won the Guggenheim, which I feel like needs to be said over and over and over again out loud, right? Freaked out because saw your pictures in the hallway and was like, love them. And so it just kind of shows how communities grow. And I didn't know that Samantha and I had that connection. And so now I do. And so I just think it's a great example of what you as students need to kind of embrace is the people sitting next to you are infinitely more important than me. They're who you're going to grow with and you're going to collaborate with over the years. Sure, I hope that we keep in contact, but it's your peers and your creative community that is really valuable. So that's kind of a very casual introduction. On a more academic level, Lorenzo comes from a photography background, also apparently my alum, which I was surprised when I was putting together bio, both went to NYU. And Sarah actually comes from a psychology background, which I find really important and fascinating as to how the two of you brought your work together. And they're both interested in using their practices to kind of elevate awareness and knowledge in the political arena of trans culture. Is that a simplified summary of your entire practice? And so I'm really excited to have them here with us. And I'm just going to kind of turn over the lecture to you. They said that they'd be happy to have questions asked in the middle, but for the sake of technology, I think at the end, if you're interested in asking questions, you can come up to the screen so they can see your face. If you don't feel comfortable, you could step to the side and ask your question anonymously, but we're going to have that at the end. So without further ado, here you go.
Thanks so much, Rose, for that introduction. We're very happy to be with you all today. And Rose, I'm so glad that you started off talking about collaboration and how important your neighbors are and the people that you meet going to art events and supporting other artists, because I feel like that is the sole way that I have been able to thrive in New York. And meeting you as our next door neighbor in the studio was thrilling to meet you and then find out your work was something that I had been seeing on a daily basis in Prospect Park. And we're super excited to be here. So, have you?
Yeah, that was, yes, same. I remember if you could, yeah, it was just amazing to see your work, your public displays, and then to your public installations, and then to be like, oh my gosh, that's you, and then to meet, and then, yeah, the generosity that happens in supporting each other, or your generosity, but then, but also, yes, I do really want to come back to that conversation point about creative community and the importance. So thank you for starting us off there. Speaking of which, actually, Sarah and I have been collaborating with a new queer and femme-led art space called SOMAD in New York. They have 4 floors of a building right on 23rd Street and Madison in New York, and they are putting forth like queer and femme-led arts programming. And we worked with them for Spring Break Art Show in the fall, and then kind of coming out of that, they decided to produce a 30-minute documentary on our process, our collaboration, and in particular, our project Shimmer Shimmer. So I'm actually hoping to start off there. So we'll play a few clips. It's 30 minutes, so we won't play the whole thing, but we'll play a few clips that work. So I'm gonna just go ahead and get that started. And of course, Rose, please let us know if, audio is not working or anything else like that. Mm-hmm.
Just because they might be helpful.
Okay, the lighter.
Okay, have the lighter.
The extra hand warmers we got.
Okay.
Jet oil.
We're not going to be getting in the water today. We're not
What,
getting
you're
in the
bringing
water
those towels?
today. I'm not going to bring them because we're not getting in the water
No?
today. No.
We might need to take a dip.
No. All right. We might need to take a dip. No. Tell me now.
Because you're so no straps.
Let's try that.
Well, okay, so first of all, Reese in the summer is like so crowded, and it's beautiful, and it's a party, and it's where like we can both just be so comfortable just in our skin, in our bodies, and just exist without having to like worry about what our physical presence is doing to other people. Like, oh, is my physical presence making someone else uncomfortable? I love being outside with you all day. I love the like concentration and the effort that goes into it, and like it just feels like, people talk about like creative flow. The creative project is our third. There was a cute dog that just walked by, but there's like really no one here, and it feels very like romantic in a way.
It does.
To be
Yeah.
with you in the winter.
It is very romantic.
Yeah.
One thing to note is we might want to move the whole setup over just a little bit. We came here the first summer that we moved to New York, or moved back to New York. Lorenzo is from here originally, but when we moved back from Portland, friends brought us here and were like, you're going to love it. This is going to make you so happy. And for me in particular, the expansiveness and sense of freedom that's here feels a lot like San Francisco on the West Coast to me. And I walked up to this and was just like, oh my God, what is happening? Look at these amazing outfits and beautiful people. And it was so queer, and like a massive party on the beach. And I have always been concerned about spaces, whether or not they start off as beautiful what we do as queer people, it feels like, is make everything more beautiful around us. Like wherever we go with whatever material we have, we make it sparkle and make it shine and be colorful. And this space is a really amazing example of that.
The last bit is to get these triggers working, and then we're good. And then just test, got the kind of general body light, more pointed face light. The sun will be our edge, most likely, but I have an extra edge light over there just to, if we need to kind of blast it up. So yeah, getting close, getting close. No, that looks really nice at front.
Okay.
So Sarah's gonna glitter me, and then yeah.
All right.
Glitter me.
Glitter me, baby. When we were doing test shots for this, and we had first covered him in gold paint, but it didn't have the right magic feeling. And we tried iridescent glitter and landed on gold because it just looks so good.
What do you think, baby?
Yeah, looks good. Okay.
And then where's my head falling?
Your head is no. Okay. Okay. We had it so you were in the bricks, right?
No.
In the
glass.
Okay. God, I'm so sorry. The camera is about to be decimated.
Okay. My head should be in the.
Underneath the second window.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you lean back a teeny bit? Perfect.
Can I come take a look?
Give me what? Let me do one more round, okay?
Yep.
Yeah, when you're leaning back a little bit, the shadows are really good.
Okay. Is the shadow from the tent coming in too much in the foreground?
No,
Great.
not
Okay.
at all.
So arm here, hand, wrist forward. So leaning back a little bit. How about this shoulder?
Let's do it a couple of different ways.
Okay,
I'll tell
okay.
you.
Okay.
All right, relax. Shut your eyes for a minute. Okay, I'm gonna refocus.
I can't figure out how to hold my mouth.
Put your tongue on the roof of your mouth.
Okay.
Make fish lips for a second, and then relax. Can you turn your face slightly to your left? A little bit more. Okay, now let me see that with the flashing. You see what I mean? I want more light on your chest.
Yes. And my face looks weird.
I think that more light will help. Put your left forearm over your leg the way that it was. I know it feels weird, but it looks more masculine.
I trust you.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Last one. Close your eyes. Tongue on the roof of the mouth. Open your eyes. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Okay, let's go warm up.
You sure?
Yep.
All right.
Positive.
I was glad I was able to stay out there that long and work that long on the shot. A lot of times it's like 6 or 8 shots max. And hey, we're back. Can you can you hear us?
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely seamless. There you go.
Wonderful. So yeah, we feel, I mean, I'm speaking for both of us, but like we have both expressed gratitude for having that video, just because it is sometimes hard to explain the collaboration. Like you're saying, we're the only collaborators here, which is very exciting. Thank you. But you'd be surprised how many people come see the work and like will ask like, but who's the artist, you know? And I feel like it, the myth of sort of this like soul genius, or the artist, you know, working alone, you know, this kind of, yeah, the soul genius comes up a lot in art history, in particular, in the patriarchal canon of art history. And I feel like our collaboration kind of fights against that, but also speaks again to that idea of the way that creative community and collaboration are part of, I think, every great body of work, right? There's always more than one person. So now I'm going to switch tabs and share our presentation and go to some stills. So here.
Okay. I was just thinking that coming from a psychology clinical, but also academic background, and thinking about how authorship is debated, but also in, you know, in academic journals and publishing, like how it's like really clearly defined because it's had to be, because like that field has progressed to where, you know, it's not for sale in the same way that when people they use it to make
like, yeah, academic writing, journals,
like it's like an unpaid extracurricular, but really important for the career. But because of how important it is for people's academic careers, the authorship and the order in which people's names are published is super critical. And it's always fun for us to talk and compare notes about how is it done in your field, how's it done in my field, and then in another part of our practice, we public and academic journals together, and we just had an article in GLQ, and we got to like really put it out on the paper in black and white how our collaboration has happened, but also like the you know, seeing the journey of and progression of your work in particular from when you started with trans portraits.
Yeah.
So maybe we could do a little bit more explicit bio.
Yeah.
And would you start with some of your earlier work, and I'll jump into?
Sure. So I'm not going to go as far back as trans portraits, but I welcome all of you to visit my website or my Instagram or whatever. But trans portraits, it was a project that I created when I came out as trans, and it was portraits of other trans guys that I photographed in front of giant Bob Ross paintings, actually. Moving from there, so I guess I've, and Sarah and I together have been interested in representation, right? So I know for me, the images that I saw coming of age and that I continue to see kind of impact what I can imagine for myself, what I can imagine for my community. And I believe also, you know, that the more we start to exist in a world where images become a vocabulary, where, you know, we communicate with each other through video. I mean, thinking even about GIFs, right? Video and still images, the language of the visual language, right, of photography is something that I am infinitely interested in. And so thinking about representation, and, you know, in 2008, when I started Trans Portraits, there was like no representation of trans people, and especially of trans guys. And
we didn't know any couples that at that time in the Pacific Northwest, we didn't know any couples that when someone transitioned, the couple stayed together and didn't break up. And there was just a dearth of information around us and a dearth of social examples. And sorry, we're at a studio. Yeah, we're at a photo studio right now, and you can hear some of, you know, gear carts going down the hallway. Sorry about the noise.
Creative community, right? Making noise in the background since so thinking about that, and then in about 2014, I began working on a project called Policing Gender. And you know, an interesting thing is Sarah's in industrial organizational psychology, and we had been talking about the prison system. And in her field, she was working with some colleagues who were exploring the detrimental impacts of the people, prison guards, prison officers, corrections officers. And so I started to explore that and research that. But I had always, for a long time, actually, before Trans Portraits, was interested in exploring the prison system from a queer perspective. And so I started to do more research, and I worked with the organization Black and Pink, which is a phenomenal prison abolition organization. But keeping it to the visual for right now, what I was thinking about was, you know, what would it look like if I created images of LGBTQ people behind, you know, who were behind bars, and what kind of visual associations would come of that. So I had done my due diligence as a photographer, right, to gain access. Speaking to a photography class, I know, like, gaining access to, in order to photograph what you want to photograph is part of our work, oftentimes. And I had done that, but then I just started to feel like, you know, if I create images that subtly connote a connection between deviance or criminality and queerness, that I would be doing a disservice instead of actually, you know, helping the fight for prison abolition. So what I ended up doing was creating these images that I call like portraitless portraits. So these draped fabrics, they're lit as if for a portrait. They're really pulling on Renaissance portraiture and the fabric being a representation of of wealth and power and, you know, this like lush beauty, but the figure is missing. And so to me, that's a metaphor for the people who are missing from our communities, because they are incarcerated. And then I combine that with aerial images, one of which you can see on the right, and the scale is about this. So the fabrics are 30 by 40 inches. The aerial images are a little more 35 millimeter scale, like 16 by 20. Sometimes some of them are 16 by 22. And the idea with the aerial images is just to kind of create a metaphor for the idea of surveillance and the ever presence of surveillance. Well, one note again for because this is a photography class, the aerial images were shot from a hot air balloon, in part because the first reconnaissance images were created from a hot air balloon during the United States Civil War. And so I think of that as sort of the first time photography was used in favor or in service of grand surveillance.
During that time, we talked a lot about, you know, like while cooking dinner or walking the dog, we talked a lot about how in my research and research that involves, you know, people that are alive, we have to go through human subjects protection. Mm-hmm. And there are certain populations of people that are given extra protection or extra consideration because they're in, you know, situations like people who are imprisoned,
like less power, right?
Yeah, they are in a vulnerable state. And so we would talk a lot about how you need to consider not only the people that like in the project, but like how to basically get informed consent for participating in a project. Yep. And so a lot of the due diligence that you talked about also was, you know, really talking with the people that you ultimately collaborated with on that project about the nature of the project, how it would be used, right, and really making explicit your intentions and what do they want to, you know, what would they like to see represented, what would be most meaningful and important to them. And I think you were communicating with like 30 queer prisoners in the Pacific Northwest.
Yes.
At that time?
Yeah. So through Black and Pink, I became pen pals with, I started out at 32 and then was upwards of 35 at certain points. For 2 years, I wrote with people who were incarcerated on a monthly basis, and just kind of asked them, you know, like, what, as an artist, what can I do? What would be helpful here? You know, I would say I'm not a lawyer, so I can't help you with legal. I'm not a politician, but, you know, what can I do? And so, and then for some people, and so, yeah, and from that, actually, I created an audio piece that goes with the installation of Policing Gender. And it is kind of edits of conversations that I had with my pen pals through our video chat system, of course, with their consent. And I'm not sure if this is, I think this is not going to play. It is on my website. So again, I encourage you to find that. But yeah, it's field recordings that I made on the sly, actually, when I was in that period of time that I was talking about where I was working on gaining access. I was given a couple of tours, which is just horrifying there's a whole other conversation, but I did some field recordings of audio that I incorporate into that. for anyone interested in abolitionist politics or just queer and trans art history, the amazing art historian David Getzi and the visual scholar, visual studies scholar and activist Che Gossett put together a syllabus on transgender and non-binary methods for art and art history, which is a phenomenal resource for educators and for students and anyone else interested in the topics. And an interview that I did called "The LGBTQ Voices Propelling Prison Abolition" is part of that syllabus. So yeah, again, I encourage you all to look into that. And it was published in Art Journal, and because they thought of it as such a great resource, they're actually sharing that without a paywall. This is the journal that Sarah had mentioned. Again, if anyone is interested in queer theory, I highly recommend GLQ, which is one of the oldest academic journals. So it was actually originally named like Gay and Lesbian Quarterly, right? Because it was Gay and Lesbian Studies for a long time. And now it just goes by GLQ. And there's a special edition called Queer Liberation Means Prison Abolition, Queer Fire, Liberation, and Abolition. And this, again, if you're interested in learning more about abolitionist politics, ask us questions afterwards, but also check out that resource. So coming from policing gender, we can, the next sort of major body of work that I worked on was in collaboration with Sarah. So while conversations that we were having informed policing gender a great deal, the next project, Monumental Resistance Stonewall, was I think our first like official, first-ish. Mm-hmm. Oh no, Fluid was before this, right?
No,
it was
this
after.
was the first one.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about how you got started on that?
Yeah. Well, we had just gone to see Murray Hill speak at the School of Visual Arts, your other alma mater. And during that talk, Murray Hill talked about, he's an amazing performance artist, but graduate of SVA, and they had moved in their early career towards performance art. And Lorenzo has talked a lot about this, and over the years, we make videos of each other just dancing across the stage somewhere, but this one in particular was a good opportunity to officially collaborate on this. And we made a time-lapse video that consisted of images that we made every 15 seconds for 24 hours from midnight to midnight in front of the Stonewall and on Pride weekend. And this, it was a amazingly collaborative with community project. We could not have done that. You can't sustain for that long without community coming and seeing you on purpose, but then also the amazing energy that was at Stonewall during that weekend. So Lorenzo stood for 24 hours, and this is so sad but funny, but at the end of it you're like, what if my legs never work again?
Yeah,
but what if none of the shots turned out on the cards, but it was a really kind of intense and theatrical feeling production, and a lot of fun. And we just started sharing that through SOMAD's Instagram site as well. So you go now. Starting to babble.
No, you're not. It's all babbling. Right? So yeah, so that video can be found on my Instagram, which is just my name, Lorenzo Triburgo, but also through somad.nyc. But it's just under 3 minutes, and yeah, like Sarah said, it's time lapse. One interesting thing. Well, also I don't mean just for the sake, in case people don't know the importance of the Stonewall Inn, it is considered one of the birthplaces of the LGBTQ civil rights movement. So during the 50s and into the 60s and 70s, it continued, but police would regularly raid gay bars and arrest people. For example, up until 2011, there were laws in New York City still on the books that if you were wearing, you had to be wearing at all times at least 3 articles of clothing that matched your assigned gender. So if you were walking around, police could stop you, right? Stop and frisk and for a whole other thing. And if they discovered, oh, you're not wearing at least 3 articles of clothing that, match basically your genitalia, then we can arrest you. And so they did this very routinely until one night in 1969. People started fighting back. The history really is that there were a number of trans people of color who really started fighting back. We don't, of course, know all their names, but a few names that you might know, or if you don't already, you should look into, are Marsha P. Johnson, Stormy de la Verre, and Sylvia Rivera. Those are three really incredible figures who started the LGBTQ rights, civil rights movement in the US. And part of the reason why I'm barefoot and topless, I'm topless to try to be kind of as visibly trans as possible. But a lot of people ask, why are you barefoot? And in some ways that was the scariest part, right? Standing barefoot in New York City. But that is because I was trying to offer like vulnerability. And this piece really is an homage to those trans people of color who, you know, forged the pathway for us, but have yet to really gain the privileges that some of the other of us in the LGBTQ movement have, or community have gained, and
are under attack in our legislature across the country on a daily basis.
Yeah. So this was 2018, and
currently,
you know, they're current. Yeah, it's still there. I think, you know, yeah. So we started this. We did the project in 2018, and it, for better or worse, seems to become more and more relevant as time goes by.
And as a qualitative researcher, I was, of course, interviewing, you know, as I was, you know, taking pictures and making sure everything was going well, interviewing all the people that went by, and it was, yeah, an amazing collaborative process again. But it also kind of cemented my desire to bring the elements of my research practice where I combine audio and visual sources with data and more quantitative sources to triangulate any social phenomenon that I'm looking into. And of course, with the current legislation and the bigotry and misunderstanding that genderqueer, non-binary people face in this country, I wanted to direct more of my creative energy towards making these sorts of projects with Lorenzo. And I love directing him. I love being behind the camera. He's a great model, and there's better words for that I can't think of right now. But this was the beginning of test shooting of our current project, Shimmer Shimmer. So we did test shots all around New York, in the Catskills and Fire Island, you can see there, and Inwood Park in northern Manhattan, but then landed on Reese Beach in Queens on the Rockaways. There's a section of the beach that has been LGBTQ, the queer section of the beach for almost a century, if not longer. And as I was standing in front of the beach the day that we did the test shot of Lorenzo's in front of the sunset, I spun in a circle and was like, okay, we've got at least 12 shots that I can see here. This is fascinating. And it's also a place that we both love and feel very comfortable in. And I've never experienced the freedom that I feel there to be in my body and feel no shame, and to just share in the appreciation of beauty and wonder of the queer community.
Yeah, and it's literally just the place. I think, you know, I said this in the video, but it's like the place on earth where I think we both feel the most comfortable. You know, it's hard to explain to people who don't sometimes feel uncomfortable just existing in their bodies in public. But going to Reese, it feels like all of a sudden there's this, you know, imagine like a constant ringing in your head, and then the ringing goes away. That's how it feels to be at Reese Beach for me, and I think for us. So we did the project in the winter for a number of reasons, but I'm sharing here just a couple of screenshots from Instagram. You can see what it's like in the summer. So it's very crowded. And honestly, like this, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but that little empty spot in the beach on the left-hand side is also quite unusual. Like I'm looking at this thinking like, oh my God,
get that
yeah,
spot.
grab your towels, run. I think, you know, we were like, okay, how are we going to get these shots? So let's show you some of the images. So for example, this is Venus, and
each of the images is linked into a celestial body. And we started off looking at classical Greco-Roman statuary, and looking at how if I directed Lorenzo to like, okay, raise your left shoulder, drop your right hip, move the position of your hands, move your chin, those typically gendered poses looked completely different, like looking through a kaleidoscope as I was looking through the camera lens. And so we started with the classical, more gendered positions, and then extrapolated that to the meanings that astrology has ascribed to the planet Venus. You can see that this one may draw a recollection of
Botticelli's
yeah.
Birth
Do
of
we
Venus.
have that picture? Oh, anyway, people probably know which one it is. But and so we started this project right after Lorenzo stopped taking testosterone. Why don't you? I don't want to talk about you in the third person.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So, first of all, when we were doing the test shots, part of what happened, we finished Monumental Resistance, and we're still in the Trump era, and in a lot of ways we still are, right? And we are in the Trump era, and all that means is that people are feeling emboldened to release their hate and violence, right? Like
just try to limit the civil rights of other Americans.
There you go. That's a better way to say it. But
for political gain.
And thinking about that, I started to think about that, and then also the abolitionist politics and prison abolition. I started thinking about, like, what does it mean for me to continue to take testosterone and pass as male, right? So in the world, I pass as male, and so I thought, okay, I'm kind of willfully accepting this male privilege, and I started to question that. And as a feminist, I was thinking, like, what does that mean, and is it a choice, and where does my gender lie? Is it in me? Is it always about how I'm read? Simultaneously, not only was I being read as male and kind of questioning that from a privileged standpoint, but my passing as cis male kind of made us as a queer couple, Sarah and I, invisible as queer. I'm just going to roll through some images.
A really interesting process when you started taking T and started passing in that way in like 2010, 2008.
2008, yeah.
Jesus.
And so I decided to stop taking testosterone as an experiment and to see, what would happen to my body, and is it possible, stemming from prison abolition, is it possible to embody gender abolition and kind of be more visibly trans queer myself and more visibly queer as a couple.
And these images for me feel also vulnerable and tender in a way that trans masculinity is not often portrayed. And that's an important piece to me.
And I put in these detail shots because when you're looking at the images printed on the wall and you can get close, you can see the shimmer of glitter, but it is kind of subtle when you're looking at it from a smaller figure. This is Luna. And I'm sorry, I don't know why the title, okay, I'm gonna stop touching the mouse. So this is Luna, and this was created in March 2020, just one day before the city of New York shut down for COVID and went into quarantine. And so, although that's not in this image, right? And as photo students, right, well, you hear about, like, well, that's not in the picture. You might be describing the situation, but I don't see that. So this is sort of, again, a backstory, and one of the the delights of being able to talk with people about the work instead of just sharing it with them visually without the backstory. But essentially, we were scheduled to have a show for Baxter Street Residency, which, again, as photo students, Baxter Street should definitely be on your radar. So write that down. And we were slated to have a show in April 2020, and we knew that we wanted to have a full moon shot, and this was our last chance. This was the last full moon before April 2020, which then, of course, turned into the last full moon before New York City shut down and the world really changed, overnight. And so thinking again about astrology, it does just feel important. And then again, from a photo point of view, everything was captured in camera. None of these are photoshopped. Just as important. So it just felt like a really important moment. I guess if we have a few more minutes, I wanted to see if the video buffered, but I'll share this. We'll go back to the video that SOMAD made to see if it had buffered to catch us up, and then we can kind of go to the spring break section, because one of the things that Sarah and I are working on is creating more involved installations, thinking about, what you want to talk about that a little bit? Or?
Yeah, spring break gave us the opportunity to do a massive build out to encapsulate the images. And so we had the opportunity to build a 30-foot grotto let's see, should we see the video buffered or not?
Yeah. It's kind of easier to see it that way.
Okay.
But you'll see that there's these constellation images that go along with the figurative images. And again, that's a way for us to kind of a little nod to queer astrology, which is really important for our community.
A way of thinking about not spirituality, but belief systems in which queer people are not damned to hell.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. All right, so it's like, I think we start, this is okay?
Yeah.
I know that, all right.
I wondered if we could go back to the video screen for a minute and check in. And
yeah,
there's about 10 minutes left.
I don't know if you all heard that, but just we're just checking in time-wise. I guess, Rose, you can let us know, do we have time to share like another 8-minute segment? Or should we go
to how you're being, can you hear me? You're being incredibly generous, and whatever you want to offer us, we'll take. I own them for another 2 hours. But they're also very engaged, and it's open to you, and I appreciate anything you want to share with us.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll play another chunk of the video.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I'm going to mute us now.
That were named after these gods, but then therefore stripping away the gendered portrayals of them in the Uffizi to a not like abolishing the gender that took place in those statues and using your body in this performative way to embody gender abolition. And each of the poses has an origin in the story of the planet that it's assigned to. So yesterday, or on Monday when we were shooting, we were working on Mercury and the idea of communication. And
yeah, so we had, in Mars, we have the front portion of the building, but for Mercury, thinking about communication, we wanted to have an image in the series that includes but kind of memorializes the the queer trans power, and then the eyes painted with the progress flag, and the
on the front of,
and then the know your power,
the building at Race Beach.
Yeah, which didn't exist in early 2020 when we made Mars. So now Mercury will have that, and then that's like a great metaphor. It's us. You were saying this the other day. It's like us, our community communicating to each other. Know your power.
I think that writing went up during the uprisings of 2020, in that June after we had made the first series of images.
Yeah.
So it's been 3 years. As you've said, you think your body has stopped changing in relation to the absence of testosterone. Yeah. Or the testosterone shots that you're taking. Yeah. So we're not going for like a before and after situation, but at the same time there is an element of time that I want to recognize. I'm not exactly sure how to do that yet, but we'll see as we take the last 4 of the series, kind of what shakes out. And a lot of how we work together is going by gut instinct. And so there's a lot of research as like a baseline. So I feel like we've got a lot of like shared language to work with before we go out and shoot. And like, we talk about this in the car and on the train and as we're walking the dog. And it's like, I love this time of our lives when we're like swimming in a project together. It feels really good.
We had this idea, Sarah and I, that we wanted to see what it would, for a while now, we've wanted to take the glitter constellation images and make them more of a full installation. So we created site-specific glitter constellations for floor to ceiling and floor covering wallpaper. And then we also have been exploring this idea of the grotto that has its roots in the word grotesque. And so I was thinking about like anti-assimilationist embodiment and how like being willfully grotesque is part of that, and it's an anti-assimilationist way of being potentially. And you're like, why don't I make a grotto? I know. You're like, I can build a grotto for spring break. Like, you do the wallpaper. I'm going to make this grotto. And we're like, great. So we got the specs. We're like, okay, it's going to be a 12 by 12 room. Then like 2 weeks later, no, actually, it's a 30-foot wall. Okay, great. Then like a week after that, actually, it's a 30-foot wall with like 2 other freestanding walls, but we'll get you the dimensions soon. And so, yeah, you just started creating this crazy spray foam installation on the 3rd floor here, and you mocked it up like really well. It was pretty cool. I mean, it was close.
I guess I've been in a somewhat of a New York bubble because I know that this work, we created the work in order to push the conversation forward. But I was unsuspecting about how much that conversation would need to be had at spring break, and how many times over and over and over I would have that conversation with people. And it was a little shocking of like, what's happening? What am I looking at? And a lot of older white men feeling really emboldened to discuss your body and ask like really invasive questions, where I just wanted to be like, Google that. Okay. Oh, yeah. We don't need to have that conversation today. And you ended up putting on your mask at times. Like it was when it felt more crowded, but also when it was, you're like, I don't know that I need to like take a break from standing in front of this work where I am portrayed, and I'm getting so much transphobic feedback from people, and like a lot of really good feedback too, but it was a little shocking.
Yeah, shocking. There was a number of people, mostly like, cis white dudes, but whatever. But there were like a number of guys who came up to me and were like, yeah, I mean, it's really cool. I mean, at first I was just thinking like, where's his dick? And I'm like, you see that you're talking to me, right? And I'm like, well, that's, it's one of the conversations that we're hoping to have is about gender, and what does that mean? And can it be, is it always attached to our bodies? And I'm like, but it was like shocking to me that specific thing, like, where's his dick, was, at least 6 people said that to me, which is very, I think, specific and strange.
Many people said that to me too.
Yeah, and so, and then in a way, I'm like, okay, great. So this, to me, means that the work is doing its job, as hard as it might be to be so vulnerable in that space, be like literally putting myself on display for the sake of that in a way. I'm like, okay, it is, even though it doesn't seem very like radical to me, I guess I'm like, I think the work actually is like.
Do you think that it's in part because like as we were creating these images, we talked so much about the characters that you were playing? Okay, we just have a couple of minutes left, but that was a good stopping point with that video, and just wanted to see if you guys had any questions, or Rose, anything that you want to talk about?
Yes, I do. I'm going to put the lights back on, so if students come up to the computer, you can see them. So give me a moment here.
Awesome. Oh my goodness, there's people here?
Yes, there's people in the box. Okay. First of all, thank you. That was incredibly, as I said, generous. And it was really nice to hear the underpinnings of projects and the work in progress, and seeing how your collaboration happens live. Those videos at Reese are incredible, just to see you out there. So I'm a native New Yorker as well, and I grew up going to Reese. And while I'm cis, I am been part of that community my entire life. And that for those of you who have not been or experienced those spaces, it's like no other. It really is. It's almost otherworldly in the best way possible. And I've been really excited to share that space with my son now. So that's our beach. That's how we roll. And it's just been, again, otherworldly in that I feel so honored to be able to have access to that in my space and my community. So thank you. I do actually have a question for you before I open it up to class, because I am very excited by your work for a variety of reasons. But one of them that I see in such an interesting overlapping way is its connection to sight. right? So obviously, from walking by my giant things in the ground, that I'm very fascinated by the history of land and the history of spaces. And you are, the Stonewall Project's engaging in that very clearly, the Reese Project very clearly, but also the prison, right? Because that is a type of site. And so I wondered, for students that maybe are not working in politically active work necessarily, how you can kind of explain, I don't know how to phrase this question, but explain what kind of energy or charge, or explain if you're not influenced by spaces. Like, do you seek out the space for the project, or are you in the space when you say a project needs to happen about this space? Like, it is which order, if it's that clear. I'm just curious about where the inspiration comes from. Do you seek out spaces that are performing what you're engaging with, or are you in the space and realize that something needs to be done with it?
I think for Shimmer Shimmer and for Monumental Resistance Stonewall, it actually felt like the idea, and I think I kind of work this way, where the idea comes first. Like, I know people photograph and make art in all different ways, where sometimes you photograph and the images speak to you and then the project comes out of that. But I have always worked in a way that the research, queer theory really has always inspired me. And so the idea comes first, and then like, what does it look like? Where does it take place? And why kind of comes after. And we've talked about this, but I sort of like have this Venn diagram of like, personal experience, theoretical and political concerns, and then aesthetics. And when I feel like the project kind of hits the like apex point, when I feel like all three of those things are like singing together. And so it's more like that. It's more like, what's the best way? Like, if I feel like, okay, what's the best, most interesting way to express gender abolition and, queering and transing the body and embodiment? Okay, well, let's start with me performing for Sarah, and then let's do that in all these places, and then we do it at Reese, and then, oh my God, it has to be here. And then it becomes about that space. And then the more we photograph there, the more it becomes about that space. And in particular, then thinking up to, even COVID, right? And all of a sudden it becomes very much about New York. And then, if you want like queer space and New York, I think are.
Yeah, well, they're queer space in New York, any institution in New York, unless it's like state funded, is ephemeral. And you can like map onto a timeline different eras in which, like, the Christopher Street or any particular areas of the city are a magnet for queer people, and the ways in which history and politics and the confluence of those happen to make those spaces not just accessible but chosen. And that has always been important to me. And the building that is at Reese Beach is being deconstructed right now. There's cranes up, there's jackhammering all day long. The building has been condemned for 20 years, but now is the time apparently to take it down. And there's a bunch of activism and advocacy taking place around what can go into that space. And currently I believe it's slated to be a parking lot, which just feels too much like a Joni Mitchell. So, like, this is ridiculous.
The tragedy, yeah.
Yeah. So in a way, like, the reason that space feels so amazing is the people that are there in the summer. But, as we've talked about at other times, it's almost anti-assimilationist in that other groups of people don't want to be in that place that's backed by barbed wire and a decrepit building. And so this is a reasonable place, like, and that's one of the, historical and political reasons of why that space can be, I don't have the right word for that now, but
safe or
why it's desirable for us, because it's not desirable for some
right
others.
Yeah, so we can carve it out for ourselves,
yeah,
and not be
yes. And another example would be the Stonewall Project initially started out taking place at Times Square, and Lorenzo was like, I really want the idea of like being a spectacle, and, you know, it was in the same area where the other people are in Times Square, as like moving, you know, living statues. And we, you know, set up for the shot. And as you as photo students know, like, you don't always get it the first time. Lots of times you go out 3, 4, or 5 times to get the exact thing that you can see in your mind. So we had done all the prep work, all the like pre-lighting, all this stuff. And then the day that we were there and we like started the reel and we're shooting, people were coming up and like poking Lorenzo like this and touching him, like objectifying in a way that I was just like, I don't know, as a femme-bodied person, that is, you know, that unwanted negative physical contact has been a part of my life since I was like puberty, right? You know, a lot of femme-bodied people can empathize with that, but it was like, oh my God, what is happening and what is going on in this insanely commercial space in the United States that it makes people dehumanized to the extent where they will treat others as though they are objects. And then right around that same time, 2 police came up and were like, listen, you don't have the right paperwork, blah, 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 blah. So I kept them talking as long as I could to continue to get more shots. But ultimately, it was like, this isn't going to work. Okay, but we've got the equipment. We've got, you know, all this stuff has been entered. Okay, how can we make the work that we want to see come out into the world? Well, it was also Pride weekend. Okay, where I want to be after being in Times Square is I want to go to Stonewall. I want to go to like the middle of the thickest part of the Pride celebration. Let's go there and see what we can make happen. So we put everything into a cab, and on the way over, we were talking about resisting resistance fatigue and like the kind of firestorm of political attacks that the Trump administration would throw to try to either confuse or hide,
overwhelm,
or
and
so we were talking about going to Stonewall and starting the project at midnight. Like, how can we salvage all the energy that we put into creating this shot here, but then in that kind of magical way where you're right place, right time, right people, right energy, and then something that you like can't believe comes into existence, and you're there with your equipment and you can make it happen. So two examples of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that really speaks to the entire creative practice, right? When you're, you know, how do you harness that energy, even if the initial idea didn't come to be? Mm-hmm. How do you continue to create when sometimes, you know, it's just all against you, either politically or just practically, you know?
Yeah.
So that's really interesting to hear the background of that entire Stonewall project. I am going to open up to the class if there's anybody who wants, because I could ask you questions all day, but I do have the luxury of truly having you as neighbors, so I can do that. Is there anyone that has any questions? I know sometimes it's difficult to formulate questions immediately after seeing, especially such a great presentation of so many complicated and fascinating body of the work. Is there anyone that has questions?
And we've got a couple more minutes before we need to split. So
make it happen.
Feel free to ask us anything big or small, or share with us something you think we should know.
There's a lot of pensive looks happening.
That's totally fine. You can connect with us on Instagram if you have questions later.
Our names, like, oh my gosh, yes. Hello.
Hi, I'm Liam. My question is, how did you become comfortable enough to show your body to so many people and just to show it to the world? Because that's something I struggle with personally.
Thank you for that question. Actually, that's really hard. So I'm not exaggerating that we did the body of work, we did all these pictures, we printed them, we hung them. The show that was supposed to happen in April that I referenced earlier actually got pushed to October. The night before the opening, I put my head on the pillow and I sit up and I go, oh my God, Sarah, like, people are about to see a bunch of nude pictures of me. Like, it just literally didn't click in a way. And I'm not exact. I don't know. It just, I think I was just so, we were on a timeline. I was just so driven about like the light, like, do we get it? And I think also it's performing, right? So, yes, I think that it's, for me, I'm not Lorenzo in those pictures, I'm Venus. And I'm somewhere between Botticelli's Venus and David's Michelangelo. And I'm only really able to do that because I'm performing, and in particular because I'm performing for Sarah behind the camera. I think her looking at me she looks at me in a very particular way, right? Like, you love me. And so she can kind of drive that. And then we didn't stop on it, but if you look up Mars, it's kind of a more like,
Action.
It's a little more action. And so I'm embodying, with Mars, it's like assertive and kind of in my mind. Sarah gave me the direction for that shot, for example, that I'm leading the charge of a queer uprising. And so it's really about performing. So
if I could add here also, we have work up at the Southeast Museum of Photography right now in a show that's all about tweaking self-portraiture, expanding self-portraiture. And there's 10 artists in that show that all have, if you go to Southeast Museum of Photography, all of their information is linked there, and they have amazing resources and a lot of different ways of thinking about self-portraiture and showing one's body.
Yeah, it's called Threshold, the show. Good call.
It's being written down. That's what's happening. If you
love that. Oh my goodness. Southeast Museum of Photography.
And by written, I mean typed into a phone, just to be clear.
Yeah.
I was using a colloquial term. So yeah.
All right.
You practice like everything else. The more you do something, you get desensitized to it.
Yeah.
And sitting. I mean, honestly, like I was not, as you saw in the video, putting myself out there was not necessarily the hard part. But then being in that Spring Break art show, if you're not aware, you should also look that up, is a big art fair. So thousands of people came through, and that's what we were talking about in that video of like sitting and hearing all this kind of transphobic stuff. Again, creative community, right? So, and also queer community. So I relied heavily on my friends. So when they came, it felt like a relief. When other queer people would come and recognize Reese or whatever, like having those conversations was very life-giving. And, having community kind of available to me on, my friends knew what we were doing and that it was going to be really hard. And so they were not on call, but kind of. So things like that, having support around you is also really important for like recovering from kind of experiences of vulnerability.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I met you, the weekend after? Is that when?
Yeah.
And I felt like the two of you were still kind of unpacking and detoxing from that experience,
Absolutely.
2 months.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just to speak, it's not easy, right? It's not, but also to Liam, just to clarify, there is also a difference between, I think what you went through at Spring Break, at standing in front of your work versus making the work, right? And so that's always every artist's kind of dance, right? Do you make work and do you like shove it in a gallery and run away and like, panic for the 3 hours of the opening and never do it again? Or are you someone who, and that's why I'm so impressed by your practice, because you truly use it as an activist action. And that is, again, putting yourself out there in the moment, standing in front of the work is another layer of that activism. And so it's very, very impressive. So thank you. I know we have to let them continue. If there's any burning questions, they're Instagrammable, both of them. And I really, truly want to thank you for joining us. I'm sorry that we didn't get the shot of the whole room, but we'll take a little group picture and send it in waves.
That would be great.
Can
And
you put a picture of us on the screen?
yeah. Oh, sure. Hold on.
I'd love to see what it looks like.
Can we take a selfie with you?
Yeah,
this is something we want to do. All right, everybody
Great.
pile up in front of the screen. If you have a second, we'll just do it. I actually stole this from Samantha Nye. She did a lecture last class and I was like, this is so great. So
Yeah.
Oh, great. Thank
shove
you.
yourself in front of the screen, quickly, go. And then, of course, are you going to opt out? Can you be the photographer? Okay. Who's photo? All right. We have who's photo. So we're gonna have one of Atlas is going to document us. Yes.
I like how it looks.
The bookshelf.
We're watching photographers in action. It's terrible.
We can't see.
We can't see. We see a bookshelf.
We just see your bookshelf.
Thank you. All right, I'm gonna spread back. Hi, our fake bookshelf. I will send that picture, but it was definitely a bunch of photographers having a moment.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I like a round of
Thank you so much for
applause.
having us.
All right. Thank you guys for having us.
And I hope to see you soon.
Okay.
All right. See you there. Bye.
Bye.